back a couple of decades back when you were first starting out. What was the best and also what was the worst piece of advice you ever got from somebody else in the business? And did you pass any words of wisdom on to the gentleman on your left?
Best piece of advice. Well, the best piece of advice, it sounds so corny, was to try and follow your instinct. You know, easy to say, hard to do. Worst piece of advice? I don't know. I usually give myself the worst pieces of advice, I think. I guess, I don't know. I mean, it's funny about advice, isn't it, in this business? You don't really want any, do you, when you ask people for advice? Nobody does. You ask, I've got this terrible decision to make, I don't know what to do, which essentially is a version of, but enough about me, what did you think of my performance? So I've tended not to ask because I know I'm too stupid to take it. Boys, did I thrill you with wisdom beyond my years?
I keep it's
never
funny.
work with me again.
I find that I always try and listen for quotes and find some quotes that I can have in interviews and things, and you know, I learnt this one particular thing, but I don't. It often doesn't happen as simple as that. Like for me, what I got from Ken was the whole process and his attitude to work and his love for what he was doing and the preparation and the enthusiasm, and it was an overall sort of thing I got from personally from his him, the way he lived and conducted himself on set. There wasn't a sort of sit down one sort of classic line necessarily, Good. That one I remember to listen to,
Yeah. I guess I'd say the same. Actually, my housemate this morning was walking around the house wearing a T-shirt which just read, "Work hard and be nice to people." And I think that's probably something I've learned from Ken. And everybody is actually something that Ken probably doesn't know is quite as specific to him, is that he doesn't leave a single stone unturned. Everything in the story is excavated. Every possibility is looked into with an extraordinary curiosity and the kind of power of his intellect and almost encyclopedic knowledge of different things. So any number of you can get any number of different sorts of notes from Ken, acting notes. You can be, this is your Peter O'Toole take, or in one instance he came up to me and said, Tom, this is the moment where the thin steel rod that's holding your brain together snaps, and then walked away, and then promptly span on his heels, came back and said, I'm aware, by the way, that that's a rather challenging thing to ask you to do, so we can have a couple of goes.
I got similar things, and also this is the take where you go berserk, and you're with your mates in the pub and just let loose, go. So it was
it was
varied approaches.
One of the things we because we kept wanting to retain wild man Thor, the berserker strain of the Vikings, the absolutely wild, unbridled kind of warrior nature we used to refer to. So we talk about a berserker take, and we were always talking about the point at which Loki may or may not have stepped over into the other side of what may or may not have been madness, or may not have been a kind of evil. So there was always a kind of ongoing conversation as it was evolving about when that might happen. And then what they were both very generous about was being brave enough to offer up different kinds of things. Sometimes actors come in and go, that's how I'm doing it. I do this bit loud, I do that bit quiet. I'm funny here. I've got 2 tricks and you'll see them both by lunchtime. Whereas they were ready to, across any number of takes, which isn't always easy. Some actors think there's something wrong. They've got it wrong if you go over 3 takes. But again, rehearsal helped to say, hey, no, this is the moment when, and if you can trust me that we will sculpt every single moment. The glory of film is, if you're great for 0.25 of a second, it's in. It's in. That look is in. And that's movies. That's when suddenly both these performances just have that. There are moments in it where, in the editing room, your heart leaps. It's just fantastic. You think, Christ, but that's in a bad take. But it's amazing. I can take that jewel out of there, and I can put it over here, where he's absolutely brilliant. Often they were brilliant all the way through. But the construction of that kind of thing is great. Something I remember from my first film, because I was in it, and I realized I could stop myself being as bad as I had been in some of the scenes I was in by putting it all together. Magic of editing.
Fantastic. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I'm sorry if I didn't get round to your questions. But thanks for coming, thanks for your questions, and please give it up for Kenneth Branagh,
Thanks very
Chris
much.
Hemsworth, and Tom Hiddleston. Thank you.